Hello, this is Ben, and today we're going to talk about a basic question. If science is omnipotent, then basically, why do we need God? And for those of you who haven't thought of this question, basically, what you're saying, what we're saying is, we can explain everything in terms of science. So, one fellow likes to say to me, give me some proof of God. Give me something that I can't explain away with science. And if I can explain that away with science, then it's not proof of God. But so give me something that I can't explain away. And what I want to say to you today is that really doesn't disprove God. It really doesn't. And so the way it works is like this. Let's just give an example to kind of set the stage here. Before Isaac Newton came along, people had a really hard time describing a mathematical model for the motion of the planets in the heavens. We observe the planets with telescopes, and they would move across the sky, and it's like, what's going on up there? Are they just zigzagging up there? What is that? And Isaac Newton came in and gave a model of description and even mathematical equations for the orbits of the planets around the sun, and even how Earth rotates, and the whole 9 yards. And he had instead of circular orbits, he had elliptical orbits, and instead of having the Earth in the center, he had the sun in the center. Although the Earth is in the center in a way because it spins too, so everything's kind of spinning around the Earth in a way, but really the Earth is spinning. But the point is Isaac Newton explained all of that, but he had one thing he couldn't explain. He couldn't explain why the planets didn't degrade and get closer and closer and closer and closer to the sun and all burn up in the sun eventually. And so Isaac said, God must come in every once in a while and correct the orbits of the planets. And because of my scientific research, and I've discovered this thing, and I've shown that the laws of nature would predict that the Earth would and all the planets would crash into the sun, and since they don't, I found proof for God, that God's performing a miracle all the time. And so he saw this as sort of evidence for God. Well, eventually science was able to explain those orbits in terms of natural law. And so a lot of people in the scientific community say, well, you've basically just explained away God, and we don't need God anymore because science has explained away God because of this. And for whatever thing you find, one day, if we can't explain it away now, we soon will be able to. And so therefore, they see this as, why believe in God? It's just extra nonsense that we can really explain in terms of science. Now, it does explain away little gods, but it doesn't explain away a being of maximal greatness. So I want you to imagine that you're an engineer and you design a machine, maybe an automobile or maybe some sort of automated factory or some sort of mechanized device with lots of moving parts. But you did a really good job designing it, and you thought about everything that was going to happen. Right? You correctly predicted every possible thing that might go wrong. You thought about it, and you designed the machine so well that they never, ever, ever need maintenance. They never tear up. There's never a broken part. There's never a goof ever. It just works, and just works forever, and just runs great. You just got to put gas in the car and crank it, and it just goes forever, and it never tears up. Now, in reality, you're not that good. I'm not that good. No one's that good. Everything we build tears up eventually. But the better you are at designing something as an engineer, the less likely it is to tear up. Does that make sense? I mean, if you design something that tears up all the time, you're not the best versus some guy who designs something that tears up a lot. Well, if God really exists, if he does, then he would be a being of maximal greatness. There would be no greater being. So what that means is, if God's really so ultimate, then he would need to come in and correct things as little as possible. So therefore, and this is the point, God would never have to come in and correct anything if he's truly a being of maximal greatness. In other words, If we're talking about a truly ultimately great God, then he could predict and control everything that ever happens in the universe with just how he created it. And it's not that he creates it and doesn't care what happens, but that he's so masterful and so well thought out that there would be no point in him coming back and correcting anything because he already thought about that. So if you really believe in a truly ultimate God, then no matter what you find in nature that you can't explain right now, you would want to seek out an explanation for that thing as an act of worship, because this would greater glorify the God who planned it all, and you would see more of his plan through that. Now you may say, well, Ben, how do we know if this God exists? Well, there are reasons to think that this God exists, but saying that we can't explain something that we observe in nature is not a good reason to say that God exists, because there's a sense of worship to say, if I can find something in science, something in nature that explains this, then that means that the God who created it all is even greater than I possibly imagined before. And so therefore my desire to worship God should always drive me towards that. So the point is that this doesn't debunk God at all. The fact that we can explain things with scientific law and nature, it doesn't debunk anything. It just shows a greater and greater God. Okay. So if you're going to debunk God, you need to go about it another way. This is not a great way to debunk God, because it just debunks lesser gods, but it doesn't debunk an ultimate God. And the ultimate God is the only game in town. I mean, why worship a God who's not ultimate? Why not worship a great God? Anyway, so that is that for this video. I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you for your time.